And good morning, everyone. I'll pass it over to you, Alison.
Thank you. So I'm Alison Watts. I'm here on behalf of the Southern Cross Postgraduate Association, and welcome to all of you this morning for our PostGrad MasterClass resume and LinkedIn. This has been part of a series of collaboration with Careers and Beck Brown, and we are recording, so I will post a link to that shows where it's posted to YouTube. Also, I might also post in the chat box how to register for next week's workshop as well, which is our final in the series. So I'll hand it over to you, Beck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Alison. Yes, we've got our last workshop next week. Hard to believe that this is the end of the calendar year of these workshops. We will be hopefully be back doing something similar next year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you've missed
we'll do another round next year.
Another round. Yeah. And what I think I've noticed that this particular workshop seems to be, and the next one with the resume and the LinkedIn. However, really, really importantly, if you are listening at home, and for those of you guys that are here, one of the things that, because I've noticed some of you guys are slightly different enrollments from last week, if you did miss the cover letter workshop, there's what can often happen is that we can spend hours and hours and hours on our LinkedIn and hours and hours and hours on our resume, and then forget the importance of that cover letter. So please, 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 and selection criteria. So please, 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 I really, really encourage you at some point, whether it's, next week, next month, that you go back and just double check that how you're presenting your cover letter is in line with our suggestions for how to have a winning cover letter. Also, the other part, of course, in the process next week is the interview. You're in the top percentage of those in the application process if you do get to that phase. So please, please feel free to come along to that session next week, or make sure you just register. Yes, Abraham.
Yep, I missed that cover section workshop. Is there any chance I can get the recording, or? Yes,
I will. Yes, and if there's anybody, is there anybody else in here that would like a copy of that recording? Because I'll get Susie to send that out. Okay, so Rachel, Abraham, awesome. Okay, that's
I'd like to have a copy of that as well. Okay, thank you.
All right. Hang on, let me just see who we've got here. Yep, Stella. Okay, John. Yep. Oh, so once they're in there, Alison. Oh, so if they click on that link in there, can they then see last week's workshop?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. So
that's the link there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just have a click around. There's quite a few different workshops, but the careers is kind of in order in the playlist if you're familiar with YouTube. So yeah, and have a look at all the other great workshops in there as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Also, if you're, I see we've got, and I'm not sure whether you are or aren't, but if you happen to be an international student as well, I've done a couple of like little mini interviews, like an interview with international students. They're not quite as sort of streamlined with slides and things in the way that the last couple of ones have been. And there's a bit of sort of toing and froing at the beginning, but there's a couple of really good interviews in there that happen, after about 15, 20 minutes, everybody arrives and all things are going sometimes. But a couple of really good interviews with there's two with international students finding work. And they're particularly helpful in that just myself, just hearing their insights and hearing it from them is often much, much, much more powerful than me saying, you know, do X, Y, Z, because they have that lived experience of, you know, of that process. So if you happen to be an international student, please have a look at those workshops. And they were workshops held in September, if you look at it in date order. I think one of them was called Finding Part-Time Work, and the other one was, there's also some branding. This might be helpful for you. I think it was you, Lily. I've done 2 workshops in that series on LinkedIn and branding, so a lot more detail than what I'll go into today. So they should be really helpful for you and anybody else who's particularly interested in the LinkedIn. And I said I'll go over the key points today with that. All right. Fabulous. Any other questions before we start? Okay, I'm just going to pause because it won't let me close the screen, everybody, and put the slides up. So I'm just going to pause for a sec. So welcome, everybody. We are delighted to be here. My name is Beck Brown. We are delivering this workshop in conjunction with Susie Grizel, who's just been away on leave. She is one of the career development consultants and with SCU, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, and with the Postgraduate Association, who are kindly hosting this whole series. So I'm incredibly for some reason we haven't got that on there. Sorry, we haven't got their logo on there. Delighted to be here and to have this opportunity to be working with them. As we were just mentioning, there's a whole series of workshops, all brought to you by the SCU Postgraduate Association. So before we get started, I'd like to do acknowledgement to country. So I acknowledge and pay my deepest respects to the ancestors, elders, and descendants of the lands upon which we meet and study. I am mindful that within and without the buildings, these lands always were and always will be Aboriginal land. So before we kick off, I would like to just introduce to you the SCU Careers Service just really quickly. I know some of you guys have been to the workshops previously, but just if you need anything outside of this series that we mentioned, the last workshop will be next week. I will conduct a few for those that would like a consultation at the end of this series. I think it'll be the week after next, and I'll send you all an email. Love to have that time with you. There will be limited places, so please, when I send out the email, just let you know how to arrange that with me. But outside of that time, you know, if it doesn't fit with your schedule, and I think just about everybody that has, you know, has reached out at the end of this series, we've been able to get in for an appointment. But if for some reason you find that in a couple of weeks' time your circumstances have changed and that you need to get a part-time job, you've seen something fabulous and you want some help, the SCU Careers team, they are amazing. So Susie's in Lismore, she's wonderful, got fabulous team at the Gold Coast. And then we've also got Joe, which a few of you guys will have met. He is down in Coffs Harbour. He's come along to the September series and just did a bit of an intro. Fabulous team there. And they have so many resources. If you just type in that landing page there, or even take a screenshot so that you don't have to go looking for it at another point in time, they have some amazing resume samples, and you can book appointments with them. You can get an appointment really quickly, 30 minutes, to help you with cover letters, resumes, career decision making, which is often can be a tricky one, LinkedIn, anything career related, transitions, part-time work, thinking about continued study, anything related towards your career. And the team are amazing. So a few of you guys will be familiar with this slide. I do reuse this slide because it sets the foundation for just about everything that you do in your career development. And it feeds into every component of what really what is required for a career that is meaningful and sustainable and really enjoyable for you. If you focus on the self-awareness component of your career development and preparation, it might seem odd that I'm talking about this in relation to the resume, but the more time, and I talked about this last week, the more time that you spend working through and getting really, really clear around what your goals are, for example. So what are your short-term career goals? So if you're currently, say, for example, if you're currently, you know, you've got another 6 or 12 months, what are a couple of things that you can do, like a little tiny bit of volunteering, a little bit of what we call micro credentialing, to make your resume, half a page of your resume, slightly better than those other candidates. And that's something that you can do within 6 months. What are your short-term goals? And your goals will change, but there's a lot of really valuable, a lot of research and a lot of value in, there's heaps and heaps and heaps of resources around goal setting, mindset and those sorts of things in terms of and how to reach those goals. And one of the simplest ways, what we call a SMART goal, where you're setting very specific, you specifically say what you're going to do and that you're going to be able to measure it in terms of your time. Is it achievable? Is it realistic? And of course, time bound. So for example, getting a specific graduate position in a particular area, in a field by a certain date, doing with a specific job title, you aim towards that. And what you'll find is that your actions, because then you can set much smaller goals underneath that. And in fact, when I send out, there is the most, I was actually just talking about, I love all these little synchronicities, this amazing YouTube clip that I watched recently in a different arena. And a lot of the most interesting or current research around personal and professional development, or one of the areas is around making small changes. And so it's just this amazing story of this guy that made these really small changes towards goals and the things that he achieved. So I'll make sure that you get a copy of that. It's about 20 minutes, quite a bit longer than what we'd like to watch now. We love, and myself included, you know, I love a little Instagram, a little video, but it's absolutely fantastic story and an amazing example of how you can reach those goals. And also, if you're clear about your goals as you're going in to do your resume, you're much more easily able to both articulate that in your resume, in your cover letter. You may not need to talk about it in your cover letter, but it might be part of your career summary. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But also when you go into the interview, if you're clear about where you're going, and just bear in mind that where you're going, you know, in the world that we're in at the moment, it changes all the time, but then you can target and tailor your activities towards that. What do you love to do? Last week, we talked a lot about where to include interests and hobbies. So I'm going to share that. Employers are increasingly interested in and understanding the value of those other aspects of both personal and professional life and how you cultivate those, but also about what you love to do, communicating that because it can form, you know, perhaps there's a particular interest that you share about, and, you know, it's in line with, you know, something that an employer loves to do. Just make sure as best they can that they're not too abstract. I was going to say don't include Lego, but in fact you could include Lego, because there's something quite methodical and mindful about. I know a guy who during COVID pulled out his Lego set. So for the most part you can draw an analogy, but try not to go too obscure. Skills, we're going to talk a lot about that. Personality, this again, this is really topical, has been for employers in terms of understanding who to have in their team, and also, so when they're picking you and they're reading your resume, and they'll be assessing more of your personality in the interview, but they're looking for the right fit. So how are you going to fit in there? And last week we talked about motivation. So what motivates you, and the employer will be curious, to know, but knowing about things like, what time of the day you work best, because that can, help with your decision about the jobs you apply for. What motivates you specifically in your work environment? Because again, it may be an interview question. So for example, do you like to have, a huge amount of autonomy, just as an example. Here we go. Writing the resume. For some of you guys, this will be really familiar, so please, but for some of you, there may be things that are new for you. I love this slide because it gives you that visual of where the CV fits in the application process. But one of the things that and I guess that's why it's important to kind of, keep staying up to date. In another 12 months' time, perhaps things will change again. But what has happened is that every job application doesn't look, specifically like this. So there's a multitude of variables. So for example, last week I talked about sometimes they'll ask for a selection criteria to be presented separately. Sometimes they'll ask for it to be included as part of a cover letter. Sometimes they won't ask for a selection criteria, but they've given you a job advertisement with the selection criteria is usually written in the job advertisement. They're telling you what you need to do to perform in that role. So what's your sometimes personality, skills, and education relevant for the job. So what I'd encourage you to do, so important, even if you're, say, for example, you're in health or academia, don't make an assumption that because the University of Queensland wants you to apply for a position this way, make sure you read exactly, same with, there's variables between Queensland Health and New South Wales Health. There will be variables around how they want you to present that application. And in fact, what we observed working with a group of top performing graduates at SCU a number of years ago is that we did a full, this was for undergraduates, we did a full graduate recruitment process from the perspective of that we were recruiting for really high in demand graduate roles. And what we found was that our most motivated students applied for this program. But what we found was that, I can't remember the exact percentage, but way more than 50% of those top performing students did not follow the instructions of the application process. So that's one way to immediately pop yourself into the pile. So it was a full process in that they had to do, they had to present a cover letter and a resume, and then they had to do an online interview, and then they had to come to an assessment centre. So there was lots of instructions, but for really plum roles, say government roles, defence jobs, those sorts of roles, the recruitment process can be really lengthy. So it's super duper duper important that you follow. And that might seem like, a really obvious thing, but I mention it not as a criticism to anybody in this room or even to those students, but what we found that even our top students who are applying for this program weren't following the instructions. And it can be hard because sometimes, there's things are underlined and then things are in red and you've got to go over here and download this and that. So please just take the time to do that. The other thing that I'll just mention really quickly that I didn't mention last week, actually I think I did, but I'll mention it here again, is that there was a little video that I love to play in a different setting, and it's this guy talking about resumes and cover letters, and the one thing that he said how to get to the top of the pile, and it's by doing spell check. So if you haven't come across Grammarly yet, you have access as SCU students. Pop your speaking of grammar, should have a capital there. Grammarly. You can use it for free. You can use it really effectively without having to pay the premium of it. Somebody asked me about the benefits of the premium, and it's probably like probably another 5 or 10% better in terms of your writing. So you can get a lot for the free, and certainly it will do spell check for you. So really easy. You should be using it already for your assignments. Just drop your assignments in there. Okay, so any questions, so that I'm not entirely a talking head, any questions on anything I've said just about the preparation process? Oh, okay, all right. So please just jump in as you did, Abraham, Lily, any of you guys. Stefan, I know you've got lots of expertise in this area with your background. So please, if there's anything that you would like to add, you're most welcome. I loved it. Oh gosh, that was nearly a year ago when you jumped in. So please, if there's anything that you want more clarity or anything that you've heard with your background, that would be fabulous. Okay, so resume tips. Customize your resume to the job you are applying for. The tailoring, again, that might seem really obvious, but the tailoring is actually where the success rate is. So I always say to people, apply for much less jobs. And thanks, John. Oh, yes. So that is such a good point. Careful with Grammarly because it changes English to US. Yes, so there's particular words, and that would be most Australians, I think, would be relevant. So practice versus practice, not tomato and tomato. That's a great point. But for those non-English, English as a second language, that's a really good point. Thank you so much, John. Love that. All right. So tailor. I always say to people, spend a lot more time. Oh yeah, Stefan.
Just about Grammarly, you can set the setting to Australian English.
Oh, I never heard that.
I don't know how it is with the browser version, but if you got it downloaded in Word or in Microsoft, under settings, you can then set it under language preferences.
Amazing.
And then you can also select how formal you know, like conversational English, academic or whatever.
Even on the free version though?
I don't know about the free version, but if you use your SCU login, then
awesome. I'll have a look in that. But particularly for our international students, it probably won't be the difference in terms of that you're getting it wrong in an assignment per se, or even in your resume, because most people know that they can, Australian context, but it's still, but then having said that, you could have somebody that's particularly pedantic about those versions. So awesome. Thank you so much. Oh, here we go. John uses the SCU version, which does change, and I don't think you can change it. Awesome. Thanks. Oh, okay, because the account, right. You can just get your own. Okay. You can get your own account of Grammarly that you don't have to pay for, and then see if you can change the settings on there. Oh, good one. Thank you. All right. So keep the format clear. I'm going to show you what that looks like. Easy to read, use bullets. The interesting thing about resumes is that striking that balance between both the like having enough white space and then too much, and it's quite a fine art. You're creating a masterpiece. Okay, 2 or 3 references. People ask me all the time about 1 reference versus 3 references. Sorry, referees. It's referees rather than references. That's the most common term. I don't think anybody it won't be the difference between you getting a job or not. However, the most modern and current term is referees. From previous work or a lecturer, people often have, it's really common to have tricky situations for people, you know, perhaps they're abroad, perhaps been out of the workforce. So other ways, so your lecturers are a good way for that, to add that currency. If there's a few of you guys that I've known, you know, for a period of time, so you can always reach out to somebody like myself. There are, perhaps you could find people on LinkedIn that, you know, that are someone you've worked, somebody else is here, which is awesome. Like somebody, you know, perhaps you need somebody from them, and you've no idea, you know, kind of how to find their phone number and email. See if you can find them on LinkedIn. That's a common area. Feel free. That's something that, yeah, you can chat to me about if you've got something to do with that. Happy to hang around at the end if that's something. And it's really common. People get quite anxious about that. And I think only once I remember thinking, oh, I actually don't know how to overcome this for a person. There's, and I think it was something to do with them having not been in Australia for more than, you know, a week or so. But and they didn't know their. We put the international office, the international office for those international students. I think we couldn't get another one on because they hadn't been here long enough. But generally speaking, we can 99% of the time get around it. General tip, spelling, grammar, consistent headings, consistent font. I often see, again, but it is about that visual appearance, and it can be when you're cutting and pasting things that you can have differences in your fonts. Avoid graphics, tables, keep it simple. Now, this is probably quite timely to talk about. There are some fabulous templates out there, beautiful, that look really, really lovely. My strongest suggestion, so in case you go off to do the washing and you don't come back, please do not use ones from Canva. Do not use the LinkedIn. Don't download the LinkedIn, like it'll convert your resume from LinkedIn into a beautiful PDF format. If you're going to email it to someone, sure, but do not put ones from Canva, because what it does, and there are some beautiful ones, and just about any other one, here are my suggestions. So the SCU ones are really, really good. So you'll find them on that link from the first page. I have no association with this organisation in Sydney. They're just a recruitment company. They've been around forever, and it's the template that I use. And I've given it to a number of people in the last, since I discovered it a couple of years ago. It's got really lovely, lovely formatting, and the computer, most importantly, the automatic tracking systems love it. So use the it's very, very similar to the SCU ones, but it's just another alternative. And it's really helpful because it tells you what I'm telling you now. Like it actually, it's got notes all the way through it. So when you're filling it out, it tells you how to fill it out. But it's essentially, other than they include competencies, which is quite modern. Like you put competencies in bullets at the top, which is different to the SCU one, but largely speaking, it's very, very similar. Okay. So all of these are, in fact, as far as I'm concerned, these headings are almost not negotiables, but the the terms will change. Like, so for example, like someone like you, John, is, you know, you'll have a series of placements, but then someone doing an MBA won't have, unless they have done, there's a small internship. It's an optional unit in the MBA. Highly recommend that you do that internship, but it, you know, it's different because it's not compulsory, and in the way that it's built into the social work. So what you could call this is relevant experience, but we'll go through all of this. If you are doing an MBA, and I know that quite a few of our students are, and you are at home, please, 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 please make an appointment to either talk to myself or talk to the careers team about how you get that practical experience. MBAs were originally designed, MBAs by coursework were designed for people that have had lots and lots of work experience, and then it's sat on top of it. In the last sort of 10 or so, probably 20 years, people do MBAs that it's not sitting. They'll do a undergraduate degree and then put an MBA on top, and then are lacking that professional experience. And because an MBA is so broad, it can be one of those qualifications different to perhaps social work or psychology, where you sort of, you know, that it's still a huge field, social work, but it's much smaller than trying to figure out where your MBA is going to fit. So please, if that's you, please come and have a chat to myself or one of the team. But also, much more importantly, is make sure you get some sort of practical experience, so that you don't pop out with an undergraduate degree and an MBA and then no work experience to put into that resume, to start building that story. An MBA is valuable in a multitude of sectors, but it can be provide the challenge of something being too broad. So I'll go through all of this in more detail. So you're going to have your contact details. I'll go through all of that. Your career, your professional, career or professional profile, sometimes called a career summary. I much prefer it to a career objective. I find an objective just too short. If you, and I don't think that applies to postgraduate students. As postgrads, I would suggest all of you do some sort of career profile, career summary, as a like a combination, and we'll talk more about a couple of sentences and a couple of bullets if you like, or just 3 or 4 sentences to set that tone of the story of who you are. Education, reverse chronological order. Put in, like, if you've got some wonderful GPA, or you've done projects, you've written academic papers relevant to the field, you can really tailor that, so you can always have the bones there in your main resume. Just do lots of cutting, saving and renaming once you get your resume that you're happy with, and then you can add, you know, particular aspects of your research, or if it's coursework you're doing, projects, assignments, perhaps there's, you know, you've been involved in the conferences, student conferences at the uni, placement in the clinic, whatever it is. Relevant experience, so that's your placement. I talked about that a minute ago. Employment history, this can be really tricky, again, and in fact, it's one of the reasons I really love working with postgraduate students, is because of the diversity of the cohort in terms of background, age, types of experience. So, but it can be tricky for people that have got a huge amount of experience and then trying to figure out what to leave in and what to leave out. You know, different to perhaps sometimes with undergraduates, where it's, you know, it's hard to fatten it up. So what I would suggest is, if you're really struggling, or if you want to prepare, talk to me, or when you get to that time, talk to the SCU careers team, because they are trained to look for that and to help you craft and tailor that story. The automatic tracking system, Resume Worded, is wonderful for looking at, and I'll go through more of this later, resume worded is wonderful as a tool for getting the computer to aligning your resume with the computer, but also telling that the story in about what to leave in and what to leave out might be something that you need to, if you've got a lot that you want to unpack, and deciding how you, and you may, I really, really encourage just keep multiple copies of your resume. So if you've got, you know, if you've had a career for 20 years and you've got resumes, keep those, because you may want to or need to pull, and then start. I would start a new one from fresh bones and then bring in that. And then once you get a couple of hits on that, then start just tweaking it from there. Volunteering activities. So what employers, a bit like all of us now, like we want to have, I remember going to the hairdresser just recently and I said to her, she said, oh, do you part your hair in the middle? And I said, oh, no, but yeah, part it in the middle because I want options. And she said, darling, we all want options. And we do. And so we're spoiled for choice now. Employers have been spoiled for choice. The power is with you guys now. But so what employers love is they love education. You don't necessarily have to have a GPA of 6.8 or 6.5 or 5.5. I've seen plenty of students do brilliantly by really having their undergraduate having their graduate qualifications, whatever that looks like, but also then having those employability skills. But they love voluntary experience. They love TAFE. They love micro-credentialing, they love memberships, they love PhDs, they love education in every form, but they want well-rounded candidates. Now that might seem a little overwhelming, but what I always say to people is tiny, making those small steps. And so just a little bit of volunteering, for example, can fatten up half a page of your resume. You do, and apologies for any repetition, Coursera, actually, I'm a huge fan of these guys. Coursera offers, you can actually, I just enrolled in a new one the other night. They are what's called massive online classrooms. And the course, I paid for it, but it's $70 to get a qualification. The one I'm doing is through the University of Sydney. They offer fabulous micro-credentialing courses. They're called massive. They're called MOOCs. They're called massive online classrooms. They are amazing, and I've done a few. My favourite and the best service providers that I have come across, not to say these are my two favourites. So MOOCs is the broader term. Coursera is one of the service providers. They are brilliant. I've done quite a few courses with them, and edX would be my second preference. I find personally for my areas of interest, Coursera has the best options for me. But edX is also fantastic. They have courses on everything, mathematics, neuroscience, and often, so if you want to put it on your LinkedIn, it's anywhere between, I think the last one I did a while ago was $200, anywhere between $70 and up to a couple of $100. But again, you do a couple of those and that goes into your resume. You start telling and start building the story around what you're interested in. Focus on what you're interested in, and you'll find that your joy for the work that you do, if you'll find all these beautiful little pathways for your career development than what you imagined before. Other training, so that could be, I haven't done it, but I noticed quite a few of my colleagues and professionals in my field do LinkedIn courses. I haven't, not for any reason other than I just haven't got around to doing the LinkedIn ones, and I really like the ones that I do through Coursera. I really enjoy the format and how you can really work them to your own pace. I'm sure the LinkedIn ones are really similar. In fact, I think as SCU students now you have, well, I know the staff have recently been given access to those. Are you still here, Alison? Oh no, it's Coursera. Maybe my spelling, I haven't got my Grammarly here on. I think it's Coursera, like that. Coursera. Let me know if you still can't find it. Oh, here. Oh, I can't close the screen. If you still haven't, Coursera online, they are fabulous. But edX is also good. I think it's just that they have different partnerships and they're global. So the one that I'm doing that I just started the other night is with Sydney University, but the other ones, and in fact all of the other ones that I have done I've done one with Berkeley, that was through edX, and the other ones, so they're mainly, not mainly, they are American universities, but the really good universities like Brown. So yes, Rachel.
Sorry, Beck, did you type in the way you spell that? Because I can't see it.
Yeah, I'll just pause for a second. I'll find it on my phone. I'll put the exact link in there. I'll just pause the recording for a sec. I just don't want to close the really loving the area of interest more so than anything at all, for the reason that the more, and there's actually science around all this, the more you do, the more you explore and tailor and move your career towards what you love doing, what engages you, what lights you up, then the likelihood is you'll find more, and also the well-being and all those sorts of things around motivation, positive emotions, and those sorts of experiences that we have in our work. So this is what your sample resume. Now this is based on the SCU format. As I said, it is really, really similar to the Hayes one that I suggested. The only difference with the Hayes one, and it's something that I do particularly like about the Hayes one, is between the career, but what you could do, you can literally just have a look at the Hayes one and then add it. Between the career profile and the education, you can add what they call like your core competencies. So, for example, in my field, it would be around things like diversity, inclusion, and it's literally just put those words there that that you've competently work across that competency. I can't think of off the top of my head an alternative word, but it's a nice visual for, and it's also an easy way to then you'll have things that won't change, and then it's got a couple of, you'll have a look when you see it, and then across the other side on the right hand side it'll have like your technical, and I think the other two headings that just are slightly different, your technical skills, and then I think it's technical, I think it might just be technical skills, and then you can tweak those according to perhaps if you're in IT and there's something that you've recently done or something that you've done is more important than something else, and it's a really easy way to just tweak your resume without having to make tons and tons of and tailor it, but so then you can really focus on tweaking that cover letter and all those other things. All right. So education, so for you guys, this is based on a bachelor, but it's all the same principles apply. This is about how long I would really suggest that your profile would be. What you can do is you could have one less sentence, and if you didn't want to use the bullets as per the, I can't show the Hayes one in here because might be I don't know, a conflict of interest or something weird with it. But you could do a version of what I've just said, and you could just have like a few sentences and then have a couple of bullets of, like, if you wanted to sort of draw attention to, you know, X number of years as a CEO, you know, just wanted to sort of draw their attention to particular things and capture the eye. You will cover some of those real key achievements, but if there's something broad like that you want to broadly cover, you can do it with a combination of sentences and bullet points, which can be quite effective. With your education, reverse chronological order, as I said, always put, and when you get the templates off the SCU or the Hayes one, it has all these notes. Both of them have all these notes, but a lot of it will be what I'm just saying to you now. Key achievements. Now, this is where I was talking about the automatic tracking system. This is one of the reasons why we were laughing, actually, and laughing about when you put your resume through Resume Worded, which I strongly, it's really challenging to get the score up. You can put it in there 13, as far as I know, 13 times without having to pay any money, and you can get it up to 85%. It's hard work, and I say that because I've done it myself. And also, rest assured that I mentioned last week, I've had 2 professionals that have been in the field put their resumes in and they got 56%. And then I had a colleague recently so those were in you know, career development, higher ed. And then I had someone who she was in training, employability training, amazing practitioner. All these guys were amazing practitioners. And she got 25%. And I was teaching a class and she said, you know, I'm happy for you to share. It was in a different context. She said, I'm happy for you to share. And she was their trainer. Well, I was their trainer, sorry, but we were working for the same company. So the reason I share that with you is because when it tells you how important it is for you. So the combination of both having a human being look at it, absolutely. Also to talk through about what to include, what not to include. But then when you're getting down to the nitty gritty of it, I would just keep using. There's another, I mentioned this last week. I generally will only recommend things that I use myself or have used. Career One, that's www.career1. So Career One and Seek, a number of years ago, they used to sort of be on par with one another. I'm not sure what share of the market Career One has now, but predominantly people use Seek or they use Jora when you're looking for jobs, or they use Indeed. Career One, but Career One, oh, sorry, it's Career One, all one word. They offer a free resume, or they used to, I'm not sure if they still do, I'm pretty sure. And relatively, they offer a free, or careering one, there's my dyslexia in there, Career One, hang on, Career One. They offer a free service where they'll look at, they'll look at both a computer and a human being will read your resume. I would encourage you, when you get to this process, I would encourage, if you know it's next year and I'm back around, or if you're immediately ready, or you know want to go through it with me, to start with after this series, the week after, I think it'll be the week after next. Career One, Career One and Resume Worded, which I mentioned, I would use all 3 of them. Take on board, and myself or one of the SCU Careers team. If you do all of those things and get your resume up to 85%, you're going to like die of frustration. You will be on fire. Because once upon a time, you know, people probably still are paying hundreds of dollars to get their resumes written by professionals, but the computers are getting more and more savvy. But I'll talk more about, but one of the most important things about this is not only the metrics, so that's not only the score that you get like how well you did something. I raised $2,500, you know, saved the company $2,500. So the metrics, but also how powerful those action words are at the beginning of each. So things like, you know, highly competent, as opposed to just, you know, so you're demonstrating the level of competence. What was I going to say? I will talk more about keywords, because that is one of the hugely other important things, because another amazing website, and I just got a lovely email, text message from a young man who I'd worked with, and again in a different context, but he had used Ethical Jobs. This might be helpful for you, John, and anybody else who's interested in Ethical Jobs. So there's lots and lots of jobs in, and I've noticed that these jobs are not advertised always on those other traditional platforms. So Ethical Jobs, they have some really wonderful jobs. If you're finishing in a year's time, or a year and a half's time, or even 6 months, what you can do is just start playing around in Ethical Jobs, just as an example, and just playing around with exploring your areas of interest. So you can choose your areas like youth, women, disability, social work, and just click those as part of your search, and then see what sorts of jobs are coming up, and then see which ones start appealing to you. Then start following them, and then start finding out who works there, and I'll talk more. And so then you actually start to build, you've got some time to start watching the landscape, so to speak, before you get out there. Then get your LinkedIn and get your title to say disability support, you know, professional or specialist or whatever it is, just as an example. Then you find where those people are and you start following them and start having conversations with them. Something fun that I've been doing is asking people for virtual coffees, people more senior to me. People respond really, really well to that, but I'll talk more about that a bit later on. Experience, relevant experience, I'll go through all of this. Okay, so conscious of time, we might have been talking non-stop. What I might do is just take any questions, and then we'll go for another half an hour on the resume, and then I'll do half an hour on LinkedIn, primarily for the reason I ran 2 workshops on a lot of LinkedIn and personal branding stuff earlier, so jump on board to have a look at those, but I will weave it into all of this. Any questions before we just take, we might take, I'd like to say only 5 minutes, but I'm conscious that I'm talking and you might be exhausted, so I don't want you to go away. We'll take 10 minutes. Any questions though, before we just take a break? Oh, great question. Yeah, thanks, Lily. I love that question, and it's a really quite a common question. So for those that can't, if you're listening at home, Lily asked about a photo, and I hold that in like lots of things. I guess these days I try to hold 2 things in one in each hand. In that, you know, I heard about a criminal trying to get out of going to jail, and he kept his story so that he could have it both ways. And so it's a little bit like that, but there's a few caveats. So just really quickly about, you can take your break if you know about photos. You're going to have your photo on your LinkedIn. My observation is that this is just a personal observation. I'm finding that there's lots of wonderful ways to use LinkedIn, but what I've personally have found is that when somebody's looking at their resume, they don't seem to bother to look at the LinkedIn. You must put your LinkedIn on there where the photo is. So always put a photo on your LinkedIn. I would say that would be my 100%. I wouldn't even say 99%. Put the photo there. Then I've seen photos work really well on resumes. The thing with the recruitment process and is that if they don't like blonde hair, and then the first thing they see is your blonde hair, then it opens you up to being to having discrimination. Or it might be anything. It might be they've got a bad history of someone with a nose that's similar to yours. So that's the only thing that can impact it. For a long time, we as practitioners all said no. I would still say no, because it will be on your, but I always, for a long time, I put a caveat with it. I have seen it done well. I can think of 2 specific examples. I shared this last week. Lady had she was an older lady, and she was going for a job as a professional conference organizer. And the professional conference organizers, they have a particular, those that work in oil and gas or whatever, they have a uniform or a way of, well, oil and gas probably not such a good example, but nurse, you have your hair tight, often slicked back, and a particular way of looking at how you look in the workplace. And so she put this outfit on, and she had this little sort of twin set pearls, and she just looked exactly the part. She got the job straight off. So up to you, have a think. Is that helpful? Oh, yeah, good one, Rachel. Oh, great, thank you. Should you put on a resume if you have a disability, or would you wait till the interview stage before you reveal it? Yeah, really, really good question. And very topical, because there are huge amounts of opportunities. If you have a look on ethicaljobs.com, I just noticed the other day, glancing through it, I'm conscious of looking where growth areas are and what's happening, in the landscape. Huge amount of jobs in that disability space. I would be thinking about if you are going for a job, say with what's the one? Something that's Headspace, and your disability was related to mental health, and then you weave that in as part of your story in a way that is both professional, it demonstrates recovery or managing mental health, just as an example. Absolutely. If you are going into a different context, have a look at, I would do it case by case, because although by law they can't discriminate against disability, they will discriminate against anything. I'm not saying that, that's no disrespect to undervaluing a disability. What they're looking to do is to limit numbers. So I would happy to chat to you more. I do a bit of work personally in that space. So very, very happy to. It's a question around disclose and when not to disclose, and there's benefits, but there's certainly times where you just don't want it to be that it inhibits you. Yeah, really, really tricky. With my strongest suggestion would be to look for those that are employing in that space, and those that are recognised for working well and supporting individuals with disabilities. That even if it, and you can find out, I would be doing some research around, there's a lot of stuff you can research about companies and how they treat their employers with disabilities, because it's really, really tricky. And you don't, I've probably talked for quite some time about it, because I feel really passionate about the area, because of just, how amazing talent is out there that gets missed. Okay, sure, awesome, beautiful. All right, we might just take 5 more minutes. I realize I've been talking. I'll be back in 5. Hello, welcome, Dr. Filippo. Lovely to have you. We've just done 1 hour. We're just about to kick off with the second hour. Quite a bit of background and overview. So you're here in good time. I'm now just working through the sections of the resume, and then I'll talk about LinkedIn. You'll get a recording of this session. There are lots and lots of, I think it's your first time joining us. I'm so pleased that you're here. There's lots of other recordings when you receive the link for this session. There's other recordings that you can access in there too. I think there was, if you're doing a PhD, so if you're a doctor, you've got a PhD. For those of you that are, I forgot to mention earlier, looking specifically at PhD careers. Just trying to think who we had. Oh, we did. We had. I don't think we ended up with a speaker for that one. But anyway, so there's one specifically on PhD careers, and we probably do some more PhD specific focus careers next year. Oh, and if there's anything in our series before we kick off again, anything in our series that you would like to have more of. So, for example, we ran an extra personal branding workshop because people, and that was interesting for me. People felt personal branding and networking because people really wanted more in that area, and that was a surprise for me. So if there is something that you would like, we did actually, Rachel, we did have one pegged for disability. We did have to postpone it due to speakers, and so it's very likely we will do another one. That will happen. Sorry, not do another one, but that one will happen next year. It won't happen, unfortunately, this year. And one of my mentors actually is he's now the I think it's the Chancellor, but just become the Vice Chancellor, Graham Innes. He's often on the drum. Extraordinary human being, vision impaired. He will hopefully be one of our guest speakers for next year. And if anyone at the end wants you to tell, if we've got time, you want to hear a lovely story about how I met Graham. And not because you want to hear lovely stories, but it's a pretty amazing story about how when you move towards something in your career that I got tingles, lines up. Okay, so let's start. Any questions before we kick off? Anything from the first series or first hour? Okay, so I won't go into all the detail of this, but this is about how long your career profile, the top of your resume, after you put your contact details, that's about how long it should be. So adaptable, responsive, what sort of graduate you are, supportive postgraduate in a large range, achieve, so how you work, the results of your work. But this is really your story. So it will not look like the friend that sits next to you or anybody else. In fact, particularly in postgraduate arena, it's a snapshot of, and it won't. I've seen it sometimes quite repetitious of a couple of bits in the cover letter. You still want to. It wants to support that cover letter, but try not to have all the same words. So it's a snapshot overview of the best bits of who you are that you bring to the role. Then your education. Again, what's really powerful here is that you can, particularly, again, one of the reasons why I love to work with you guys is because of your history. People have done so many different things, and you do, depending on your coursework or research, you can play around with this section pretty easily. So, you know, you add particular research that you've done, you add grades. So if you're doing, you know, an MPA, for example, and you've got, you know, you've got grades that you're really proud of from particular subjects, put anything. If it's accounting and finance, and law, they want 5 and above. But even, you know, credits and things are fine. But aiming to include those things above there. In terms of the inclusion, nothing wrong with credits. Certificate in nursing, so again, play around. It must be in reverse chronological order. That is standard across all of the everybody. There's no variables in terms of what people are saying that. Oh, so John said, how do you present much older education, which is part of the story? Yeah, great. So what yep, and perfect, because I love it. You guys often ask questions that I kind of haven't quite yet gone to articulating. So John has asked, you know, if you've got education that's older but not directly relevant, a part of the story reflect career diversity and skills. Do you drop in feels dishonest or add it? So what I would suggest with that, depending on what sort of education and qualifications it is, if it's a bachelor's degree from, you know, as we get older, like, you know, it was 20 years ago, you can include it in there, but then if you include it at the top there, it can detract. Your eye sort of draws to the 1980 or even 99 or whatever. So, and if it's not so relevant, it's sort of like, yeah, you could take it out. But if you've got other skills and qualifications, say perhaps you've done, you know, you're moving back into training and you did a TAE, like a training certificate, and, you know, other relevant, you can put it, I actually prefer to put it on the second page, and you put it a section, you call it other relevant other relevant qualifications, and then you put it in there, and it seems to be much more powerful there. So it's sort of like, oh, I'm fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. And then you're telling your work experience, and then it's like, oh, by the way, I also have this, this, and this. Does that help, John? Because that's a really common one, a really common question. And you actually can leave the dates out when you put it in that, because it's like, when you're putting it in the other, then it's sort of like, well, I'm just capitalizing that, and there's no dishonesty in that, you know, because I'll ask you, you know, if it's relevant, and I'll say, well, when did you do that? Which I don't think they're going to do. So that's where you can, and that's where that value of being an older employee, where you get to really, you've done all that. And so I'm so conscious of how, because it's all how you present it, right? So just make sure that when you're thinking about what you're going to bring into the resume, what can you bring? So these are the things, this top bit here, into your, you're going to expand on all of these right throughout your resume, but your profile is going to be a snapshot. Normally we do a little bit of an activity, but I'm conscious of time. With your placements, I cannot express to you enough, and this applies to anybody doing any form of postgraduate, you must, as best you can. I know if you're almost popping out, it's fine, we'll work. You can work with myself or one of the team. You must try to get some sort of work placement experience or work experience. The great thing now is that employers are crying out for people. So please, if you're thinking about your career, this needs to be an absolute priority, particularly if you don't have, if you've got placement embedded, like, you know, social work, for example, but if you're doing psychology and it's not, then how do you get onto that Lifeline course? just as an example of an amazing program. But get on to have a look at all of the organisations that are in your arena. So I'll just use mental health as an example. So there's so many companies moving. You can't obviously work in face-to-face counselling, but you can go along to their suicide prevention, festivals and events or whatever it is. So you must, and that's how you can start to tell that story. I can't express enough how important that is. And then you can, if it's not a specific placement, you can call it relevant, or you can call it relevant professional experience, as long as you disclose somewhere the distinction between it being a paid role or a placement or a work experience. And I'm a big advocate for, if you've gone and got yourself work experience, associated with your, your profession, that you can put it here and you don't have to put it in. So if it's in social services, for example, or health, or that arena, you put it here and you don't put it in a separate section called voluntary, right? Clinical placements, so pop it all in if you've had clinical placements. When you've completed your so when you're putting your extra work experience in there, thinking about so this will apply to, and I keep referring to you, John, only because I know exactly what your course is, and you've got an amazing opportunity with those placements because that builds the story. But these same principles apply for any previous work experience that you do that's related to the role. So positive feedback you can include. So if you're doing education, you can include a quote from one of your feedback forms, a quote that says how fabulous you are, anything unique, difficult, the results of your work. Really, 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 really super duper important. Focus on achievements. So so you're not talking about, and this hopefully this will be helpful. You might like to take a screenshot of this. Everything that you're presenting in there is the results of your work, not the tasks that you're actually required to do. So they want to know. So what we commonly do is we say, well, within that job, I had to serve tables and wash dishes, etc. Employers want to know the opposite. How well did you clean that table? How happy were your customers? How efficiently did you get that bar set up ready for ready for dinner? Okay, so this is critical, and this is where, when you use resume worded, that it will be wanting to know results, metrics, action words. So for example, so this is a result, developed strong interpersonal skills. So after being with personal care needs, so it's very specific. This one's obviously related to health. Yours will be related to, so be really specific and use, if you look here, look at the words in here. These are all, we may or may not know the words that relate to this field, but you'll see words like physiotherapist, diversional therapist, occupational therapist, dressing wounds, administering medication. They are all terms that are specific to that field of work, which demonstrates your fluidity and fluidity seems like a strange word to put here, but your actual synergy and connection and your understanding with what the requirements are is communicated by the words that you use. So for example, in social work, you're going to have very different language to what you use in accounting. So thinking, and same, so one thing that springs to mind is this young man that was applying for, he was applying for really competitive government job in environmental science. And what he did was he put it was out on the ocean. He actually did put a picture of himself on a boat, and I was like, wow. That's brave. And what he did was he knew all the lingo as though he'd worked for the Department of New South Wales Fisheries his whole life. So he put all their lingo in, all the terms that they use in Lingo Land for environmental science fisheries. And I knew, because at that time, it was years and years ago, and my brother works in that field, and I was like, wow, this is going to go well. And he got the job. Took a little bit of time because he was, newly entering, but he framed it all beautifully. So it's really important, and that's where following organisations start engaging with your area of interest. And I say that because some of you guys may not know specifically, but the sooner you start that process of exploration, thinking about where you're going to be a fit, then you can start seeing how people talk. You're going to get it on your placements. You'll get it through your study. That technical language is really, really important, including your professional development. So that's where those MOOCs are really handy. Doing your first day, or some of it will be mandatory, but some of it will be optional. Including all of that. Other employment. So if you are thinking about, you've got a bit of space to include other employment, it can be really handy. I wouldn't do more than 1 or 2, maximum of 2 jobs if they're not necessarily relevant, but they do demonstrate. So if you're working in a job like this, you're working with customers, written verbs, which will be relevant for any job. You're going to be a nurse. You're going to need to use, if you're a travel agent, you're using similar skills to if you're a nurse. You need to be persuasive. You need to, you need to be actively listening if you're a travel agent. Yes, Stefan.
If you only include, let's say, 2 other employments, or something like that, how would you explain a gap?
Oh, yeah, good question. So I've seen people really, really cleverly, I've seen some people that have no experience and they've managed to have this resume that's still without lying. It's a little bit of an art. You can disclose, I've also seen people disclose gaps really nicely. So they give it a term, like they've called it, I don't know what exact term they've used, but like parenting, and then they've put the period and they've added it just exactly as a job. Couple of points, a little blurb, 2 years off to care for, 2 children. So you can either disclose it, or you can actually go about sort of hiding it and owning it simultaneously. So you can own it by disclosing it and saying, where you were, you took time off, career break, sabbatical, put a positive term on it, and then you can add a blurb. So you can do it that way, or you can hide it, not hide it, that sounds dishonest, because it's all about the framing. When you do placements and work experience, that gives it the modern dates. So that's where, sorry, I keep using you, John, because that's just a really easy example, or using social work as a really easy example. Say you've had a career in, this has got nothing to do with you, John, had a career, long career in telecommunications, and then you decide that you want to be in social work. But in that period of time before you came back to study, you were off caring for an elderly parent for a few years. When you're coming back up the top, your resume is going to have your profile, then it's going to have your education. And then what you're doing is you're getting placement, or you're getting some sort of relevant work experience, ASAP, and then that gives it the current dates, and that starts forming the story of this new, and it's a transition, so it's a little bit awkward, and it can be a little bit challenging, but you're starting a new story, but you're also simultaneously drawing upon the old story. But what can be really effective is to use placement or work experience or volunteering, and you frame that around that's the professional experience. So that gives you the currency of those dates. And it's a way that you actually then not trick them, but you draw their attention to the validity of the experience that you're having, not the fact that you had time off to care for elderly parents. Does that make sense? You'd have to see it in action. If anybody wants to work with me specifically on that, really, if you're listening at home, it's an art. Well, not an art in that, we're so fabulous at it. because you're engaged, you know, in that process. But it's very individual in that how the layout occurs, what the experience is, how much other experience. It's a very individual part of the process of putting your resume together. And as I said, I've seen several times people have had no experience at all. And I'm so convinced by the way that they've framed their study life and things that they've done in their sporting lives, and I'm halfway through the resume before I know, you know, because most of the time I know where people are at that I'm working with. I'm like, oh wow, I'm so enjoying listening about your suitability to that role. Does that make sense, Stefan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And it can be a little bit tricky, and that's where the benefit of using myself or the careers team to help with the framing, or actually more so where to put things in the order, and then you use the machines to get the right words. Which is very poignant because it's got us to, and I want to wrap up this and talk about the LinkedIn. Sorry, just back. It's good. Sorry, here. So automatic tracking systems. And in fact, I haven't put it in here. So the automatic tracking systems we've talked about, tailoring the keywords. Now, what is super duper 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 important is that if you're going to apply for most jobs through Seek, and sometimes it'll have to go onto their individual website as well as Seek. So that's where the majority of the jobs that I would say you're going for. Hopefully you get it through word of mouth, and then you don't have to compete with however many people, and you're going to get it through your network, and then you're going to send your resume off directly to somebody. That's the fastest, easiest, best way to do it, and also less painful in terms of, you know, the challenge and disappointment of having to go through figuring out what the machine wants. But this will take you time. I encourage you with every bit of my, every fiber of my being, is start to watch, get your Seek profile, make that a priority for yourself today. And so if you're planning on starting to work in 6 months' time, it's 12 months' time, you know, leave it till 6 months' time. If you're going out soon, end of this year, start getting that. So what you want to do, and then I would, you could even just do it just for fun, apply for some jobs, and then what you'll do is you'll see that it will start giving you feedback about what the other candidates had in terms of the keywords and that you didn't have. What you then want to do is to add those keywords into your profile, as long as you actually have those skills. So then the more skills you have in your Seek profile, when the algorithm, because what happens is, say, same job, same type of job, but different employer, they're all going to pick slightly different words, and they're going to focus on, you know, things that they think are important, and there'll be quite a lot of variables. It could be a combination of 30 words. But until you put out a number of applications, you're not going to know what those 30 words are. You can guess, you know, because you're in the field. So what you need to do is to go into your Seek profile and add as many skills that you can think of, then start applying for jobs, and then it'll tell you what you should get feedback telling you what skills you don't have. Then if you see that you actually have those skills, you add it to your profile. So then each time you start applying for a job, you increase your chances of accessing the words that the computer's looking for. Does that make sense? Yes, somebody had a question.
Hi, yeah, I just have a question. I've had a look at Seek recently on jobs and whatnot, and sometimes in their description, they offer obviously to apply through Seek, but also to apply like through their website or whatnot. Do you recommend doing both, like applying through Seek and then also reaching out through their website or something like that?
Yes, you mean directly through the employer's website?
Yeah, because I was looking at a listing just the other day, and they said to apply through the website, but also to reach out.
100%.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely, because you might win. Then you get to, because if you think about, like, this is actually gambling, yeah, and so you increase your odds. So you get to have a bid. Yeah, you get to have a punt both ways. Absolutely, great question. Yeah, and
thank you.
Yeah, and what I would also suggest too is that, which can be really annoying and sometimes the whole process can be exhausting, is that you go in and so, like, you can get all the way through, spend all this time doing your resume, cover letter, selection criteria, and then you go and upload it onto Seek, and then they go, oh, and by the way, you need to go to our website. And then when you go to their website, they want you to fill in all the bits. And and by then you're absolutely exhausted. Yeah. So, but I would still suggest taking the time to do it there. Also for later they might say, well, I'll come back to you. If it's via a recruitment company, you get stuck in 2 years' time, you can always go back to them. You've started the process. Yes. Yeah. Great questions. I know we've got so much to talk about. Hopefully
Thank you.
That's a great question, because it is so much about the computer. So here's some quick tips for getting around, or maybe working with, would be a better word, keywords from the job description and the ad. So, and also from their website and anything else you can find out about them. You can also, I don't do it often, but you can also talk to the employer. Just be prepared that if you talk to the employer, I remember one of my bosses previously saying, actually in the careers space, saying they were recruiting for a position in our team, and they said, she came back and said, oh, well, maybe when that person puts their application in, they won't be getting the job. So just make sure that you're ready to be interviewed on the spot if you go game enough to talk to them about the job. But what I would suggest really, really strongly, if you start getting all this stuff set up early and you start to think about where you want to work, and then actually they'll give you the names of the people recruiting for these positions. What you can do is now start asking to connect with them on LinkedIn once you get your LinkedIn all looking fabulous. And then when the job, because invariably in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, that job will come up again. Then your buddy's on LinkedIn. So yeah, well, I said buddies. All right, so that's where you can find things. Just going to quickly power through my top tips for LinkedIn. I think this is the most important thing. Depending on the line of work that you're going for, the profession, the field, talk to us or talk to somebody about how important it is. Some will argue it's super duper 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 important. I don't take a sweeping view of LinkedIn is the be and end all for everybody. So for example, the arts industry, even things like psychology, certainly anything in the business world, business landscape, marketing, promotion, accounting, finance, sure, but it's not for everybody. And so people can, but having something up there, including a photo, but only use it to how it's helpful for you. And then watch if it's just new to you, watch what you like, and go cautiously. Keep your profile genuine, authentic, describe the real you, be visible, your brand. It's not just who you are, it's also what you do. Creative, distinctive. I'm just going to show you some examples of what this looks like. And I'm rushing through this only because there are 2 full workshops on all of this. You must, my strongest suggestion, have a profile picture and definitely include a profile blurb. Those 2 are my absolute not negotiables. And of course, your contact. With your experience, if you're busy, you can just put all your titles and the length of time. What does seem to be a little bit of a trend, I've noticed a couple of professionals in my field are not putting in all the blah, blah, blah about all the key achievements. Update, so add skills. Recommendations is if you can get recommendations from, say, perhaps your lecturer, or giving recommendations is also a really nice thing to do for other people. That's a really kind thing that you can do. And then actually it looks really nice that even if you don't yet have any recommendations, that you've written a recommendation for somebody else. So that's really lovely. So maybe you had, like, I don't know, like a lecturer or a like somebody on your placement that you really, really love, just jump on there and write them a recommendation. You will absolutely make their day. So beautiful. Personalized. Don't send a request without a message. If I don't, you can, I think you can, these days, you can request to connect with people, but make sure that when they see your request, that your title is in line with their area. So, you know, PhD graduate in environmental science. So then if you apply, you know, you're trying to connect with somebody who's working for, you know, the timber business in Lismore, that they immediately can go, oh, cool, I understand why, if I don't know this person, but why they'd like to connect with me. So if your title's clear, then you can just about connect with anybody you like. And don't take any of it too personally. That would be my, so this is, I personally don't like or use like these diamonds. It looks nice here. I just use a slash between them. It does look more powerful to have a few terms of who you are. So for example, you know, PhD, and then put like a couple of areas of specialty, or and so that then, as I said, really quickly they get a snapshot of who you are. I think keep it simple, I think, to start with, until if it's new to you, and just see what you like and what others are doing. Just check your privacy settings. If you want to go and look at everybody's profiles, you can put just like Facebook, the settings, if you've ever used Facebook or Instagram or those things, or just check your settings around. So for example, I had a colleague recently, and every time he made a connection, all of his connections got told. So, and he didn't know. We had lunch and I said, oh, did you know? Because didn't worry me, but he might be a bit uncomfortable with, because he was actually building his network. So we could see every time he was building his network. Just check your privacy settings. So for example, if you're back here and then every time you update your profile, if you don't have your settings, then people will see. And please, if you're connected with me and you see anything random like that, I'd love to, please feel free to return the favor for all of us. It's a bit like if you've got something on your, you know, on your face, your good friends will tell you. All right, so summary, that's going to come directly from your profile, from your resume. What you can do, once you get your resume done, it's pretty much cutting and pasting to get started, like literally cutting and pasting and dropping it into the relevant section. So all you then really need to do is put a nice professional photograph, that lady, that's the right, you know, you want upper body, no pictures of partners, pets, and generally you want to be, if you're in health, you know, you can be in your health gear with a stethoscope, you know, but make sure that it's, you know, that it's professional and relevant to the field. Education, put all your, this is one of the areas where I see lots and lots of typos and things. So and you can really fatten out your education, you know, if you're looking for how to sort of build that story. Put the headings in there for now if you want to just pop it all in there. Try to get recommendations, but yes, you could start by when you're ready, you can approach like people that could possibly give you recommendations, but just make sure that, that you just offer that, that kindness back to others. Skills. So it used to be all about skills. Now people don't even really pay too much attention. People focus more, or recruiters paying more attention to recommendations rather than all your list of skills. But skills definitely for your skills definitely for your your SEEK profile. Absolutely, much more for your SEEK profile. Hey, Anne, we're just finishing up some tips on LinkedIn. There's 2 hours. There's 4 hours of recordings on all this stuff, and there's not as much slides because they were sort of designed. So yeah, I'm just apologizing in advance. They're a little bit more clunky in terms of I think people were coming in and out, and I'm certainly of one of them. Volunteering. Everybody loves volunteering. So even just doing once a month somewhere for 6 months, that's actually only 6 days. That's only 6 days work. Is that right? 4? Yeah. For 6 months, you've got a new story happening on there. Look for groups and things that you're interested in. This can, as I said, what I'm seeing, I saw one late last night. I actually have the app on my phone. I find it much more, it's helpful because it can be a bit of a distraction, but I have it so then you sort of engage with it a little bit more rather than having to go out and then log on. But the most amazing thing that is really commonly happening, particularly in the last, say, 6 to 12 months, and this is where trying to connect with everybody, every academic, every university, every professional in your field, they're advertising jobs out to their networks before they so it might be something to do with a project, piecemeal, voluntary, before they sort of find other avenues to get that message out there, or they're reposting jobs that people aren't applying for, or even putting it out there just as it comes out. So there's just another way you may particularly particularly for that. So that's where it's really helpful to follow those those government agencies, if it's government, whether it's not for profit. And it's just now's a really good time to just start getting it, so you can just start seeing what people and what you're interested in, most importantly. You can search for jobs. Much more jobs I've noticed, again in the last probably 12 months, are coming up on LinkedIn. Still there's much more on Seek, but there's a greater dominance for those LinkedIn being used as a tool for recruitment more so than it's still a platform for networking and sharing and all the stuff that goes on. And I say that a bit cynically in that just use it how it's use it with your own authenticity around. Steer clear of anything, probably same as Facebook, steer away from, even if so for example, I saw something about, casual academics and, how difficult it is. And this guy had a really valid, point. And I was like, I'd really like to get that message out there. But does it then isolate me from, and give an impression that I'm disgruntled, which I'm not. It's just a reality. And so just striking that, because, this guy, he'd made a really good point that he'd had a full-time job as a, Griffith University, and now he had only 2 hours a week, and, and all the expectations that he's still available and all that sort of stuff. And it's got nothing to do with this role here. I'm not in that kind of capacity. But it is a reality. And so just decide whether it will help, even you can just decide whether it will be helpful for you to join that bandwagon, or whether, because negativity, negativity feeds negativity, but sometimes, you know, advocacy is really, really, really important, because that's how change happens, through advocating. So yes, sure, Abraham. Yeah, all the slides will come at the end of the series. You'll actually get a copy of all of them, of all 4 in this series. Great question. 4 in this series? Yes, 4 in this series. Yeah, so just take it all with a grain of salt. And if you reach out to people, I had this lovely young man who'd reached out to someone, and he said to me, oh, she hasn't accepted my request. And, you know, don't worry, move on, find someone that does want to accept your request, because there'll be plenty of people that will want to connect with you. Yeah, so focus on, and that can be really hard, you know, it's vulnerable space, you know, the whole, you know, it's like jobs for dating, isn't it? But try to sit back, hang back, see what you like, what you don't, see what you enjoy, and keep focusing on what you're really enjoying, what lights you up, because that's where a lot of the research is with your careers. Hopefully that has been helpful. I'm going to pop the slides down and just take a couple of minutes. Any questions, any feedback, anything you'd like to know more about. And we'll be back here next week for our last one, which is interviews. So once you've got your cover letter, your resume done, you're in that top percentage. So, and if you find that you're in that arena and then you're having interviews and then you're not getting the interviews, I know somebody actually in that space at the moment. It's been interesting, and they're just going for another interview. So they're really but what's happening at that interview stage? So the SCU have a tool for you that might be helpful, but you can do 3 resume. Hang on, so it's called Interview 360. What I have found in my own observation with working with students is actually people need much. The main thing is you've got it all in there, but it's practice, 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 practice. So I'll share some things with you next week if you can come along. If not, you'll certainly be able to find. You won't register if you'd still want the recording. Up to you. Lovely to have you. So I'm going to stop sharing, and thank you for everybody's. Yeah, so Interview 360 is on the SCU Careers, and you get to practice online interviews. So, all right, so what questions do you have for me? Oh, yes, Han.
Hi. Yeah, actually, I forget because it's let me have a look. Oh yeah, about the SIG profile, because in my resume I didn't mention too many like employment history because it's irrelevant. But do I need to put it in SIG profile? I mean,
yeah, great question. So what I would suggest doing is work on your resume.
Yeah.
Then get myself or one of the careers team to look at it. In fact, go the other way, put it, well, at some point I want you to put it through those automatic tracking systems, but whatever you want your best resume to go up into Seek, all right? So you want that same resume. Thanks, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
You want
I asked this question because I had a couple of employment history in Western Australia state.
Oh, yeah.
And now I applied the job. There is a very rural town, and I got like a phone call, interview call, say why I applied, that far away job. And so I explained I worked there before. So I'm thinking if I need to put that employee history in my SIG profile, to.
Oh, I see. Like, I think you can specify in the profile the destinations that you're, so make sure that you've updated that, you know, in the, like when you go through and you're putting your personal stuff in there, it will say, like, I think that it asks you areas, then you still want to include that experience from Western Australia, yeah, because but just make sure that your contact details are in there. They're all up to date for the area that you're living now. Yeah, really important. If you've got experience from another, and don't take it out if it's still relevant to the field, even if it's in, you know, Timbuktu, wherever it is. Yeah. If it is relevant, absolutely keep it in there. Yeah. Does that make sense? Does that help? So just make sure you change the settings because if you were applying through Seek, perhaps in when you were in WA, maybe it's still got the settings in there, like that you've picked your location. That could be it. I'm not sure, but yeah, still keep it on the resume.
Yeah, I think I will write 2 resume, you know, once I apply that one. And another thing I just wanted to say to a student mentioned before, because I'm not sure if I'm right, if I'm wrong, please correct me, because my first placement was in disability employment area. So I'm learning Master of Social Work.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's why I love you guys coming in, because we all help each other. Yes, please share.
Yeah, and so in my office, we mainly help people with disability to find, you know, jobs. So for the resume part, we never write the disability things on the resume, and I think it's like a privacy things. And and we always ask clients how open they want to share with their disability to the employer or to the colleagues. So yeah, I think it's like a kind of privacy things. So we don't need to share if you don't want to.
Yeah, thank you. And in fact, that's so important that you've mentioned that, because when that question came up, I was thinking around the cover letter and certainly wasn't thinking in terms, because you can actually weave it into lived experience in the cover letter. But I agree 100% that you're not going to disclose something additionally in the resume. And I think that's fantastic advice. And also the reminder that there are disability employment services out there.
A lot actually.
And they do vary. And there's a big thing in the NDIS at the moment about those employers. However, if you find a good one, so thank you for that reminder. It's so good. Thank you so much. And also that importance of the privacy. Also, if you gain work through a disability provider, then they will, they have got the back end around that privacy with the employer. So that takes some of that, the trickiness, so to speak, off the individual, if that's helpful. So great points. Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Any other questions for you?
No, I didn't know there are 2 like sessions about the linking course, because I will go watch the recordings. So everything will be fine. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and just remember, they're just a little bit clunky with people coming in and out, those particular ones. So you just feel free to press fast forward.
Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. Lots of raised hands, so that's awesome. All right, Annie, tell me.
Hi, Beck.
Hi.
So my question was around volunteer work on the resume. Does the volunteer work have to be related to the job you're applying or your profession?
No, great. That's a fantastic question. Ideally, you know, because you can draw an analogy, you can draw relevance, you can, but what you can do, if it's not relevant, say, or it's too hard, you're working at the Formula One, you know, as a ticket provider, but your postgraduate study is an MPA, you're gonna highlight, you're gonna include it and add 4 points if you need to, if you want to like add some story, and then you'll highlight the things like, you know, having to follow policies and procedures. You have to effectively communicate with customers, managing disputes, yeah? So, and then all of that will be relevant for your work in an MPA. So you've got the power to tell the story, yeah, with it. So great question. It doesn't have to be, but I would just tell them, often employers are like the computer's looking for the things it's looking for, right? Thank you, Han. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The computer's looking for things, but also then when the employer's getting it, they're looking for specific things. And you've got to tell them that. You've got to tell them the story, because otherwise they make assumptions about whether it is or isn't valid, if that makes sense. So you make it valid and relevant. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you just put voluntary experience at the Formula One, it's like, how does that? So then you tell them. You tell them things that you've gained around those employability skills, process information quickly, compare data, whatever it is. Yeah. Is that helpful? Yeah.
That is helpful. And what are some of the recommended sites to find some volunteer work?
Oh, yes. So whereabouts are you based?
Based in Pimpama, Queensland, on the Gold Coast, sorry.
Oh, Gold Coast. Yeah. So Gold Coast Volunteering is a huge organisation.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just called GC, Gold Coast Volunteering. But then what you can do, so what's your area of, what are you studying?
MPA.
MPA. Oh, oddly enough. So that was a strange little coinkydink, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I thought you knew.
No, I had no idea. So what you could then do is thinking about, and this may be something that we can personally chat together about, or you can talk to Susie, thinking about, well, what sorts of organizations. So when we think of MPA, we think, oh, well, I just want to work in accounting. But then what sort of, I mean, accounting exists in the not-for-profit section. It's in government. It's in, you know, sporting organizations. It's in retail. It's in, you know, it's just about every sector of the economy needs accountants. So then I would think about what you've done in the past, what you love to do, and then get experience in that. And then you can try to bring the two worlds together. If that's, then you get to, so if you love fashion, you get involved in doing the accounting for the books in the world of fashion. Yeah. And then you get to like be doing what you love as well as, yeah. And then also then you can go and volunteer in that area, and then that feeds that story, because it can be harder to sort of, and I put this in inverted commas, get relevant experience. Yeah, but relevant voluntary experience, I should say. But you might also want to talk to, you can do I think you can probably do an internship. And so talk to your course coordinator about doing some sort of internship. That would be as well as the volunteering, and you'll be set to go.
Okay.
Yeah, great questions. I love them.
Beck,
yes.
Can I just add an example to that in terms of relevance?
Yeah.
So one of the jobs I applied for, they want like a commitment to health and safety and a willingness to, you know, keep up to date with that. And what I did, I sort of factored in volunteering as a lifeguard. And you know how you got to adhere to the procedures, and you continuously have to keep up with new standards. So
great. That's
like, I think that's always a way to
sort
of factor that in. And in terms of volunteering as an MPA,
absolutely
could be always something where you could volunteer, I don't know, as a treasurer for some association, you know, like the postgraduate association, they always have that role coming up as well. So
amazing. Thanks.
That could be something.
Yes, that's a great, yeah, any business association, yes, student association, student bodies, you've got coasters on campus, yes, amazing. That's great suggestions. And that's why I love you guys coming, because you guys are you're thinking and you have experiences, and I'm hugely grateful for that. Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Great. Stefan, while you've got your hand up there, did you?
Yes. One quick question in terms of resume. Is there too long?
Oh, yes, there is, definitely. Yeah. So in academia, you know, if it were in academia, was it you interested in academia still, all the positions?
Both.
Okay. So I in your instance, I would say, Stefan, probably 3 pages, but absolute max, whichever way you go, 3 pages max. 2 is good. I think 2 to this is a personal preference. I have a preference for either 2 or 3, because I don't like too much white space. So if they're flicking through a resume and then there's just like, you know, half a page filled and it's 2.5 pages, you kind of like, it looks like they forgot to finish the assignment. That's just a personal preference. I really like 2 full or 3 full. And again, I would think about what the job is, where you're at, and then also like how. So, I've never thought of this before actually, but you see from job advertisements, but again, I'm going to take a bit of a caveat with this, is like if they put a really detailed job advertisement in there, like, you know, some of them can be really long, even non-academic ones. Even some of the not-for-profit ones, it's like, oh, this criteria and this criteria and that, then you probably could go for 3, you know, knowing that they're really going to ask you to do everything for $45,000 a year. No, just kidding.
Yeah, but I do find it,
be careful of those. Yeah.
Yeah, I do find it quite hard to, like, I think mine is about 5.5 pages,
No.
But no, it's some of them, you know, they want to see your research profile experience, and then your teaching experience, and then education already creeps up because you have quite a bit of relevant education. And they want a section on your areas of specialization and research interest.
Yeah.
Even 5 bullet points there is like 1/4 of a page. Then your research experience, teaching experience, then
and academia.
Want to know your publication, conference papers, presentations, research grants, professional development, memberships, honors and awards, and all that stuff, and that creeps up.
Yeah, the only thing I would say though is that, you know, in academia, they've got the selection criteria. So some of that stuff is going to go into the selection criteria, depending on So then if you've got 5 pages, and academia is one where yes, but I would still be trying to because you're still going to have to put in a selection criteria. So I would still be just crafting it back a little bit, definitely, on that. But you're getting, well, and let's see too, once you get a hit as well, like as soon as, because you're just starting the process, aren't you? Yeah. So then once you get a hit, you know, okay, I'm down, I'm on the right. Then it's really just a matter of, like, particularly if you're where you're at, you're going to be going for generally speaking, similar types of jobs. Yeah. And so then it's just like, oh, okay, tweak this, tweak that. Yeah. And then you're on your way. So it's until you get a hit. I would keep tweaking until you get it, and tweaking feedback until you're hitting the mark in terms of what it is that what you're articulating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah,
because then once you've had a hit, you know that the computer likes it, and if you're called in for an interview, you know a person likes it, right? Which means that through the whole process of having to get through a computer, which is the hardest bit, different in academia, but certainly still very, very hard. And then you get a human, you're on your way. So for example, I've got somebody that's that's obviously been doing a lot of work with her, and she's just now like refined, and I'm noticing she's just getting hit after hit after hit. Oh, been called in for another interview. So it's a process. Unfortunately, it's a bit, it's actually particularly academic ones, incredibly tiring.
It is.
And incredibly, yeah, much more so than other. But once you get going and you're like, okay, then you can, it gets quicker. But in fact, for everybody, but particularly academia, government jobs are still not as lengthy as academic ones. Sorry about that, Stefan.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. It is.
Yeah, and the other thing was, if anyone was interested, how to change the settings in Grammarly, but John and Rachel, they left, so
that's
I don't know if it's applicable to anyone.
That's so sweet. So you can share it, because I'm sure
only if there's interest.
Yes, I'd be curious, because people, it seems to come up in there, but I'll just answer Lily's question, and then if she
okay,
pop out. Lily, yes.
Hey, Beck. I just had another question. So I've just finished my master's degree in exercise physiology. So I'm just waiting to get approved for my accreditation through ESSA. So the wait for that's meant to be like 2 to 4 weeks. However, I want to start looking for jobs now.
Yeah, great question.
Do you think in the resume I should put, because one of the big things is, are you accredited through ESSA?
Yep.
Should I put in the resume saying approximately when it'll get approved?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
But I would just say, frame it. It's all about framing. Absolutely. I'd start applying now.
Yeah.
And they would know, they're in the field, so they'd know the process and know, that it's all part of it. So absolutely start applying now. And I would put, expected completion date on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Expected. There's a conferment rate or confirmed time, something. Yeah. There's a particular terminology. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great question, because that does come up, same for the nurses, the social work, trying to get, membership and nursing APRA and all that sort of stuff. Yep.
Cool. I had another question as well. So I did get some paid work that was a one-off job through the uni, and then it was through another organization, Taekwondo. Because it was a one-off work, would I put that in employment? It wouldn't be in employment history. Would it be under, what kind of category would it be if it was just a one-off paid work?
Oh, I would just put it under, your professional experience.
Okay.
Yep. And I would not worry that it's one-off, because it's part of a bigger picture. So give it all the love in the world.
Okay.
Put months in there, so even if it was only 2 days work, you can still, you don't have to say it was from the 11th of January to 13th of January. Yeah, just put the month that you're in there, and then just give it all the love in the world, because it's still part of a bigger picture, and it was something that you did, and it's relevant to and it takes time to build that new and relevant experience. So absolutely give it lots of love.
Okay, thank you. So it should go under professional experience.
Yes, relevant professional experience is probably the term that I like to use. So you're going to have education, and then relevant, you just launch straight into the relevant professional experience, particularly if you're retraining. And then you put your associations, your membership, if it's, papers you've written or whatever, you put all that in there, all under that professional experience. There's many different ways to do that, but essentially that the bulk of it's around that relevant professional experience. And then you put your other jobs that you've done, whether it's in business management, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yep. So is it kind of like you're listing the most relevant experience first, and then say, because I've worked at Cotton On throughout, just like casual jobs through my degree for like 6 years, just put that at the near the bottom.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
It's
cool.
going to be one of the last things, and it'll just say other employment or other employment experience or other experience. Yeah. And then that's where you're able to draw on that employability skills. Like at Cotton On, you're still using technical equipment, you're still you're still actively working with individuals in a workplace, you're working in a team, you're following policies and procedures and sanitation and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thanks for today. It was really helpful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. Any other questions before Stefan just shows us how to, do you want to just, if you got it on, you want to just share your screen? Is that the easiest way?
Yes, but you disabled it.
Yep. Yeah, I think I just.
Do you want it on the recording or?
Oh yes, if you're happy, yeah, because I think
sure.
it oddly enough, this comes up in the last few ones that we've done. So
so you should see my Word now. Do you see a blank Word document?
Yes, yep.
Okay, so if you are on, let me just move that, that's a bit in the way. If you're in your Grammarly tab, if you downloaded it,
yep,
and then you go into settings,
yep,
and then language preferences, you will have to log in. So if you have your SCU account, you just use your SCU email.
Yep.
And then it prompts up to the SCU login page eventually. Oh, well, it did it. But if you log in for the first time, it brings it to your SCU login page. And then you go to account, I think. Then customize. Mm-hmm. Then you go to language, and then I write in Australian English.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, you can do your writing style as well, like how academically or whatever it's meant to be. So you can do settings here as well.
It's so helpful because if people aren't using Grammarly for their assignments, they're missing out.
Yeah, no, it helped with my thesis.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
It just takes so much time out too, like having to figure out, was it this, is a comma go there?
Oh, did you actually see? No, you're still seeing the Word document or not?
Yeah, we're still seeing the Word document, but we can.
I can just show it here. So you're in your
that's better.
Account, you go and customize and then language.
Yeah.
And then amazing. I write in Australian English, and on the writing style you can.
So good. In fact, I think someone else mentioned that. So it's great to in one of the other recordings. So it's great to visually see. It's always really helpful.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Lovely, lovely, lovely to have time with you guys. Anybody got any other questions? Anything? Great. So we'll see you if you come along next week. If you don't, all the best. Look out for my email. It will come out probably next Friday. I'll just put a few dates in there. If you see that and the dates and the times that I'm offering don't suit you and you want help, feel free to just write back and say, is there any other, and we can try to arrange another time that works with you guys. All right. Take care, and hopefully see you next week. If not, and I'll see you in one-on-ones. If not, I'll catch up with you guys next year. All right. And remember, in the meantime, if next week, in the next couple of weeks, you're sorted or you don't want any help, we'll be back next year. Next year, I think it'll probably be February, but also that the careers team, they're amazing and they're there in the meantime. So take good care. Lovely to great to see you. Your name pop up again, Stefan. Such a long time. So take good care, and thank you for everyone that's contributed in here. See you guys. All right. Bye-bye. And if you're listening at home, all that applies to you too. All right. Thank you.